The May Max Weber lecture. I'm delighted that we have with us today Professor Rosi Braidotti from Utrecht University, who will give us some important advice on how to live the anti-fascist life. And the talk will be chaired by one of our Max Weber fellows, Gabriele Wadlig, who will give a longer presentation of Professor Braidotti. So I'll just leave it to her. So please.
Thank you, Hugo. Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for coming to tonight's Max Weber lecture. It's a great pleasure and an incredible honor to have Professor Rosi Braidotti here with us tonight. Professor Braidotti is a continental philosopher and feminist theorist whose work is at the intersection of and draws on social and political theory, gender and queer theory, as well as post-colonial studies. Her intellectual project, from nomadic theory to post-human theory, has been concerned with questions of identity, subjectivity, and alternative subject formations. She has continuously challenged traditional dichotomies between nature and culture, between mind and body, and between human and non-human. Her most recent work, her work on the post-human condition or the post-human convergence, is at the forefront of current debates about reconfiguration of human identity and subjectivity in light of technological and ecological transformations. She developed her theories on the post-human convergence in 3 monographs: The Post-Human, published in 2013, Post-Human Knowledge, published in 2019, and Post-Human Feminism, published in 2021. It's no exaggeration to say that her contributions have been transformative to many fields, including continental philosophy and feminist theory. Professor Braidotti has received numerous honors, including most recently the Humboldt Research Award for lifelong contributions to scholarship. Today's lecture is entitled How to Live the Anti-Fascist Life. Professor Braidotti will outline an anti-fascist philosophy of affirmation inspired by critical neo-Spinozist philosophies and contemporary feminist and anti-racist thought. So please join me in welcoming Professor Braidotti.
Thank you. So great honor to be here, back to an institute where I spent very, very happy years before some of you were even born, judging by your faces around this table. Back in 1999-2000, actually, when I was a Jean Monnet fellow first and then Jean Monnet professor in the era of Yves Meny and Luisa Passerini, and I had, among others, the great honor of delivering the first Ursula Hirschman lecture, which I understand was also the last, or the second last, on gender issues in Europe. So great to be here. I understand that we have acoustics problem, so if something is wrong, please let us know. I will try to stay within 45 minutes because I speak too much and I get too excited, so you have to switch me off. Switching Rosi off is a crucial concept in critical theory, and I want to leave room for the discussion. I've decided to take on a very boring, unpopular topic, how to be an anti-fascist. And I've decided to do that because I think it's become very cool to be a fascist and very cool to be right-wing. So I think, how did this happen? Okay, you can already start, okay, boomer, and then the discussion is over. So let's put that to the side for the conversation. And indeed, there is a generational element, of course. Anti-fascism for my generation is not just a resistance to fascism, it's a value in itself. It is a value that is at the basis of the Italian Constitution. It is the value that is at the basis of the Ventotene Manifesto that founded the European Commission and the entire project of the European Union. So it's not just any value, it's foundational, it's unquestionable, sacred in a totally secular sense of the term. And the teachers that I was blessed with having, particularly in my Sorbonne period, Michel Foucault, who was already at the Collège de France, Gilles Deleuze at Vincennes, were proclaimed anti-fascist and vehement pro-Europeanists. Notably, Deleuze and Guattari were federalists. They were European federalists. Remember that if you think of Deleuze as some funky, psychedelic weirdo. Vehement European federalists because they knew what fascism had done to Europe, and they knew the deep roots of fascism in the European mind. When Foucault, in a rare moment of generosity, he was a genius but not generous, defined Deleuze and Guattari as the great ethicists, great ethical philosophers, he defined their work as denazifying European philosophy, cleansing European philosophy from its deep attachment to imperialism, colonialism, Eurocentrism, superiority, and more superiority, cleansing those sick roots of entitlement and exceptionalism. Foucault defined Deleuze and Guattari as neo-Spinozist ethicist, denazifying European philosophy. I would argue that the job of denazifying European philosophy has not been done sufficiently, certainly not in Italian culture, a job that remains undone. So the very mindful of the crucial importance of the anti-fascist life as a principle in itself, I wanted to kind of invite you to reflect on some contemporary features of what I would call the microfascism of everyday life, borrowing microfascism from, I think, the great philosophy book of the second half of the 20th century, notably 1,000 Plateaux, 1000 Plateaux of Deleuze and Guattari. That is the text. If you read nothing else, that's what you read. Cancel your life. It's about 1,000 words of impenetrable prose, but it's worth attempting to meet the challenge. Fascism as a historical phenomenon has been studied up to a point. It has not been studied as a philosophical phenomenon. The idea that fascism is something historical and behind us is inaccurate even historically. At the time that my teachers were writing in the 70s and I was starting university training, there were still fascist dictatorships in Europe. Spain until 1975, Portugal and Greece until well into the 70s. We're not in 45, we're 30, 40 years later. And that is even leaving aside totalitarian regimes as we had in the Soviet Empire and in other parts of the world. So to see there's something behind and beyond irrevocable and unrepeatable is historically inaccurate. It is simply not so, nor did the critique of fascism even remotely begin with the landing in Normandy or the ruins of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. If anything, the critique of fascism died, as did the critiques of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, probably the least studied genocide that we have in our history books. So what I enjoyed, what I loved about the French philosophy of the 70s and 80s, and I left Australia where I was growing up to take a French government scholarship to study in Paris, because I wanted to follow Michel Foucault's analysis of how democracies evolved from the ruins of despotism. And I wanted to listen to Deleuze and Guattari explaining why fascism is a state of mind, is a philosophical framework, as well as a historical, sociological, economic argument. It is a culture and that drips into your system bit by bit, day by day, to the last syllable of recorded time, if I may quote my beloved Shakespeare. Microfascism as something that we need to come to terms with, something that is before us, something that is repeating itself, replicating itself like a viral infection under our very eyes. What is the fascinating power of fascism? I'm quoting here Susan Sontag in one of the most wonderful essays called Fascinating Fascism, which is an analysis of the photography and cinema work of a genius, Leni Riefenstahl, Hitler's favorite filmmaker, totally, thoroughly Nazi, and like Heidegger, a genius. Nazi geniuses that are part of our culture, and we simply omit the fact that these were Nazis. You can open any history of feminist art today. You will find Leni Riefenstahl. You may find some veiled reference to the fact that she used Roma Besinta people from concentration camps in her films, that she filmed the Nuremberg Rally, that she coined the imaginary of fascism in a film that, if you haven't seen it, you need, with a good bottle of scotch, called Triumph of the Will. It's the manifesto of world fascism. It's a piece of brilliant cinematography, thoroughly, completely, homicidally fascist. So we kind of exalt their Heidegger never repented, never took a thing back, not even Hannah Arendt could make the old goat change his mind. In every history of philosophy book, a genius. What is it? What is the fascinating power of this complete disregard for the dignity of others, for the reductive mindset that is fascism? But I'll give you a more detailed definition of it as we go. So historical fascism is a quick way of avoiding the issues, to say it could not, it's behind us, of course, we would never go back to that. Well, really, can we look more closely at the sexualized and racialized hierarchies that make the fascist worldview? It is basically a differential hierarchical system that sees at the pinnacle of human evolution European men, the masculinism, the Eurocentrism, and speaking as a happily wedded lesbian, the heteronormativity, the reductiveness of that vision of the human. We are saving the human, but we are saving the man of reason. I am quoting Genevieve Lloyd, my teacher at the Australian National University, a great Spinozist. I will be talking about Spinoza if I manage to get to it. I quote her text, Part of Nature, the best introduction to modern Spinoza you can get. The man of reason, the pinnacle of human evolution, the wonder of all things. What a masterful piece of work is man. European humanism. I am in awe of our culture. I am a left-wing patriot. I am not an enemy of my civilization. I love this civilization because it gives me the freedom to criticize it, which is more than I can say for others. But my way of loving it, like my way of loving everybody that I love, is to be lucid, to be clear, and to demand accountability. Fascism brought home to the metropole techniques of domination and racialization that had been experimented in the colonies. I am here with my brother Paul Gilroy in believing that fascism is colonialism brought home. Shall we open the chapter Colonialism and the deafening silence of the philosophical roots of colonialism, the belief in the superiority of the worldview, of the values, of the systems of thought that we Europeans represent? How understudied is that? Locke and Hume and even Hegel actually, in private papers, the recent Hegel paper discovered a couple of months ago showed that in his youth he said a few things against the slave trade, but the philosophy is unequivocal white man's burden, that the responsibility of Europeans is to bring the light of reason to them, barbarians. It's part of the discourse. Now, I don't want to go back and do cancel culture. I loathe political correctness, but holding our systems of thought to accountability is what we need to do as scholars in order to prevent the repetition of the worst aspects of our glorious culture. Our culture is too deep and intelligent and advanced to be simply monumentalized. We need to keep it dynamic and open and vibrant and critical by being accountable for its multiple shortcomings. So the fascist philosophy is very simple. The transcendental powers of a very defined, very specific vision of the human as that particular man. In my book, I reduced it to the Vitruvian man, a beautiful sketch of the ideal of the Renaissance. And I also point out that that Vitruvian man, the measure of all things, is imprinted on the badge that the astronauts wear in the NASA space exploration programs. That vision of the human is on the flag that we set on the moon in 1969. Humanism has already gone intergalactic, and with the new developments of space exploration through the transhumanists, led by another piece of work by the name of Elon Musk, we will have this vision of the humanist man going into outer space forever and ever and ever. Don't forget that transhumanism is hyperhumanism, but if there is time, we shall come to transhumanism as well. Transcendence in the idea that reason is somewhat above it all. The transcendental power of universal reason is supposed to be self-correcting, in spite of ample historical evidence to the contrary. Racialized and sexualized systems that create hierarchies of otherness, where being different from means being worth less than. It's difference as pejoration, difference as inferiority that is the problem with these hierarchical systems. A very peculiar relationship to science. These Nazi people, neo-fascists, they're pretty funky thinkers. They go into the most esoteric theories. And today, in the era of plot theories and conspiracy theories, between fake news and alternative truths, the actual status of scientific truth, you must be painfully aware of it yourselves, is really quite threatened. If we are into alternative truth, you can forget the men of reason and the ideals of scientific objectivity. Pretty much anything goes. This spurious spirituality, this rather sick kind of pseudo-thinking is one of the traits of the fascist mind, and it is, well, my Jewish friends would have a few things to say about this type of kind of celebratory, kind of fuzzy thinking, soft-headed thinking, as some of my teachers would say. But of course, you also know the other features of the fascist mind: authoritarian nationalism, patriarchal sexism, homo and transphobia, nepotistic economics and endemic corruption, suspicion of technologies, rejection of human rights, systematic racism and xenophobia, cultural racism, and the list is open. We kind of know it, don't we? We do, but it has become somewhat disengaged from some sort of ethical response whereby we would actually feel that these issues, that these values matter, that they touch us, that they concern us, that they are urgent, that actually challenging them is something that we do at our own risk and peril. Why is the fascist mindset so seductive? Why is fascism fascinating? There's a wonderful film by Nick Cave where he talks about the way fascists in films always hold the cigarettes between the last two fingers. Do you remember? I think it's in Down by Law, one of those. They keep the cigarettes there and they look at you and they go, oh, that is a very interesting face you've got. Fascinating fascism, the seduction of a certain type of violence. We are going into murky territory here. The seductive power of certain forms of violence is an issue that very few critical thinkers would dare to take on. To his credit, and he paid with it for his life, Pier Paolo Pasolini did. And Salò is a masterpiece of a film about this endemic seductive power of homicide, of murder, or I love you so much I'm going to kill you. I am dying to get to you. That is not even sadomasochistic, it's a thirst for blood. It's a cult of death that is lethal, literally lethal. Death, the ultimate seduction. We can also go there. I did do many years of psychoanalysis in Paris, and I still think that the best reading of fascism is from that first generation of psychoanalysts, Erich Fromm being one, but others who talked about the force of the death drive, the almost irresistible seduction of the corpse that we all potentially are, all of us walking bodies married to our mortality. Murky territory, very little work done on this. Maria Antonietta Maciocchi, one of the few who talked about the sexuality, the fantasy world mobilized by the idea of the domineering force of a master. Colonial thinking, decolonial, post-colonial thinking, also very strong on the mixture of repulsion and attraction of the black body, the Islamic body, the other as a site for multiple fantasies of destruction, manipulation, and finally, enjoyment in the spectacle of the power that you have over the other. Deleuze and Guattari single out the enjoyment of your own power, the fascination and enjoyment of your own power as one of the features of micro-fascism, which is micro not only because it is small in scale, it's an everyday apprenticeship to not caring about the anti-fascist life. It is not only a matter of quantity, it is also qualitatively very sharp and focused. It's a protocol, it's a set of steps. It's the frog being boiled little by little. You get used to this, and then you get used to that. And all of a sudden, it's perfectly normal to be chasing people down the street and to be saying, we need to change the constitution because I want to be president for life. Just, of course, we're not even hearing it. What is it? That you fall asleep. Now, Spinoza, who is the philosopher that is behind Deleuze and Guattari, is the true source of inspiration, wrote memorable pages in his ethics, but also in his theological political treatise. And he wrote these memorable pages about what he calls the poisoning of the social sphere, the poison that actually makes the social political body sick. And he wrote this in the middle of one of the biggest political crises of modern European history, the end of the Dutch Republic, the collapse of the Dutch Republic, which led to a civil war. You may remember the painting by Rembrandt of the killing of the De Witt brothers, killing in the streets, the end of an era, in relation to which our times are relatively peaceful. Spinoza lived through really a cataclysmic change. And what is his response? To retreat and write a treatise of ethics, which is, according to Deleuze, clinical as well as critical. It's about developing the antidotes to the poisons of complete disorder, authoritarianism, collapse of democracy. Spinoza, the thinker of radical democracy. Spinoza, the man that inspired not only my teacher Deleuze, but people like Etienne Balibar, Tony Negri, and the whole generation of thinkers who, after May 68, declared the Marxist Hegelian paradigm obsolete. 1972, Deleuze and Guattari in Anti-Oedipus declared the Marxist Hegelian paradigm completely inaccurate and useless to understand modern capitalism, and they called for a change of political ontology by returning to Spinoza. The turn to Spinoza is, again, one of the least studied moments in political theory. Too bad that Tony Negri got hold of it, because he made a mess of that one as well by mixing Spinoza with too much Hegel, and we get a bit of the multitudes problem, but still the message is loud and clear. Only radical democracy can express the will of the people for the people. There is no other system. And for this, Spinoza paid a very heavy price. I wanted to remind you that Spinoza is still the only one, the only philosopher we have in European philosophy that is still excommunicated. Descartes was, but the Archbishop of Utrecht, pushed by us, lifted the excommunication about 10 years ago. So Descartes now is clean. We could not, or they could not lift the excommunication of Spinoza. There was an attempt that Edgar Morin accounts for in his book, Mes Philosophes. He talks about the attempt to lift the excommunication of Spinoza. Everybody had agreed, State of Israel, the great rabbi of Amsterdam, everybody in agreement. There was one veto that sank the whole episode, and the one veto was by Emmanuel Levinas. And so, thanks to Levinas, Spinoza remains the only excommunicated philosopher in our history, and I'm sure he carries it with pride and joy. The response to conflictual, poisoned social context is not passivity, is not falling asleep, is not resignation, it's finding the antidote to the poison. So there is an immunological paradigm here, a parasitological paradigm. There is also quite simply a detox. You can do this easily with psychoanalytics. I think you can do it with the biopolitical. I hope we can come back to that in the question. But the micro-fascist in us is the part of us that falls for that fascination, consciously or not. It's like a gentle lulling into, but of course, all blacks, but of course, asylum seekers, but of course the women of Me Too, but of course surrogacy, of course all these are disposable others whose existence doesn't matter, but of course a suspension of the critical function, a going to sleep. And I remember my grandpa describing the 1930s to me, of that generation, and as is saying, now, people were normal until the day before, and from one day to the other, they were not normal anymore. They were talking in sound bites. Everybody was repeating the same sound bites. You see this in The Body Snatchers, the film from the 1950s, which is about the Cold War, whereas the Americans depicting the effect of Soviet communism. And everybody from one day to the other speaks in sound bites, and they're all saying the same things, and you're all over-coded by a system before you even had the chance to say beep. The micro-fascist in love with his and the perceived power of others. Spinoza's life philosophy as the antidote. That's the message. I've already let the cat out of the bag. Reread the Spinoza's political ontology as a response to the failed attempt by Marx's Hegelian system to create alternatives. Don't forget May 68, for those of you who even know what May 68 was, failed. It was a failed revolution, cultural revolution, politically. De Gaulle goes back to power, and the special laws come into effect. Some revolution, but of course it introduces modern culture and la nouvelle vague and all of that. Politically, not really. My teachers around Althusser and the group of philosophers took stock, and they said, we have a problem here. What politics can match the power of transformation of capital? Is capitalism even an accurate reading of what capital is capable of doing? Deleuze and Guattari wrote this the day after the Bretton Woods Agreement, in the years that followed at 71, 72, with Bretton Woods, with the value of money being delinked from gold. Neoliberalism is born. And 1972, Anti-Oedipus, the first 3 chapters of Anti-Oedipus are about neoliberalism, 72. In which Deleuze and Guattari say, we have a new economy now that bears no relationship to the real economy where we produce things. It's an economy where money talks to money, finance talks to finance. $1 earned in the financial economy is not the same dollar that you earn in the real economy, 1972. What the capitalism is doing that Hegel and Marx had not seen, argue Deleuze and Guattari, is that it has invented something new. It has understood from fascism that it is all about manipulating your desire and your fantasies. So we make you desire objects and shiny things, and we give you the means of actually fulfilling those desires by giving you the ultimate tool, credit. And credit will result in the very simple result, debt. The future of capitalism is indebtedness. Lazzarato's entire work on debt comes from the first 2 chapters of the Anti-Oedipus. He's very honest, he quotes it himself. 1972, they understand that the mutation of capitalism is fast, it's quick, it's ruthless. The communist parties don't understand that, the trade unions don't understand that, and the battle between the left philosophers who are thinking beyond Marx and Hegel, returning to Spinoza, and the classical left is huge, and it's bitter. Sartre attacking Foucault, the Communist Party attacking the neoliberalism of Deleuze. It's a head-on collusion of worldviews. But Deleuze and Guattari are trying to rethink the democratic process after the end of the Marxist paradigm. That's the operation. And they model themselves on Spinoza rethinking democracy after the collapse of the Dutch Republic, saying what we need here is critique and creativity, courage, hope, lucidity. We have to understand that we're sick. There's a sickness in the air. That's the operation, clinical and critical. It's also the name of a collection of wonderful essays by Deleuze and Guattari on literature, by the way, absolutely crucial. Crucial thing then, understanding. The great thing about Spinoza, and for all of you building academic careers, is very important. Spinoza is part of our history. So if you work with Spinoza, you are going back to the future. You're relying on the tradition to move forward. And that's very, very safe in a very conservative period, such as what we're going through now, where I want you to build brilliant careers. It's safer to say, let's look at this with a feature from our history, the great Spinozist experiment, rather than borrow it from funky feminist theories, faraway decolonial theory, suspect politically correct theory, all of which I hope that you will do from the bottom of my heart. But I am retired, my career is done, I can afford to be radical. I'm not sure that you can. So be careful, go back to the future. We have these radical thinkers that have been understudied. So then how do we rethink adequate understanding of the conditions of our bondage? How are we becoming not free? When the ethos is freedom and free choice and consumerism, what are the boundaries of our unfreedom? What are we being deprived of day after day, soundbite after soundbite? What kind of sort of viral infection are we sort of nursing collectively, step by step, without even noticing? Adequate understanding, crucial. In my work, this becomes the cartographic method. Can we account for the conditions of production of our knowledge? For us working in the university, it has meant, on my side, critical reading of what the university, what a major institute like this is doing and not doing, what margins we have, what do we stand for in a world that is so obviously in pain. I defined the posthuman convergence that Gabriel mentioned kindly at the beginning. The posthuman convergence is the simultaneous happening of huge technological advances with even bigger climate change ravages, making social inequalities and economic inequalities a bigger problem than ever. It is the concurrence, the co-occurrence of those events that is the problem. It's not as if we have AI on Monday and climate change on Thursday afternoon. They're happening at the same time. Can we actually carry on as if we had eternity before us? And is the university as an institution was the guardian of timelessness? Or maybe there is a sense of urgency, of responsibility for the world that we're in? Just maybe, question mark. Or are we wrapped up in a different universe where rules and protocols and all kinds of things are coming in between us and the task of thinking, adequate understanding of the conditions of our bondage? Spinoza, forever, go. The most rigorous, the most difficult, the most antipathical, really, of philosophers, but that's not an issue. What a mind, what courage, what does it take for embracing the praxis of collectively distilling an understanding of our living condition? What kind of community would that be? And the adequate understanding for Spinoza is connected to the ability which we can only nurture together to create affirmative values. Affirmation is, for the ethics of joy, in Spinoza, is the most misunderstood concept in his philosophy, partly because Hegel hated it. He would have, wouldn't he? Because, of course, it just puts the negative in the rubbish bin of history. And Hegel's scathing assessment of Spinoza as this kind of, I'm just putting my language, wishy-washy hippie that believes that we're all part of the same natural order, has weighed very heavily on Spinoza. The same criticism, by the way, is repeated today by Alain Badiou about Gilles Deleuze. Exactly the same, it's word by word. These naturalistic philosophers who just don't understand the cut of the negative. It's not that they don't understand the cut of the negative, they reject it, saying that we are part of a nature-culture continuum. Spinoza, we didn't have to wait for Donna Haraway, much as I adore her, to have a nature-culture continuum. It's in the ethics of Spinoza. Mind-body continuum is the anti-Descartes, is the opposite of Cartesian dualism. Our culture had a choice. Cartesian dualism or Spinoza's monism. Which one did we go for? Guess which one is more useful as a tool of governance? Dualism or ontological egalitarianism? Obviously, with dualism you divide and conquer. Obviously, Descartes forever. What an error. I think there is almost nothing that Descartes got right in terms of the science, in terms of the psychology, very little. Read Antonio Damaso, Descartes' Error, looking for Spinoza, how contemporary neurosciences are embracing Spinoza. We are all made of the same matter. If you go to a neuroscientist or to a physicist like Carlo Rovelli or the others and say, you know, we're all made of the same matter, they will look at you and saying, oh, really? Tell me something new. Like, have you been under a rock for the last 30 years? Only in the humanities and the social sciences is the statement, we are all made of the same matter, revolutionary. For every other branch of the sciences, it's a banality. And when many, many organisms today attack the humanities and social sciences are now defending themselves by going big data, but the methodological attack on the humanities and social sciences is you don't get the science right. You're still there with your mind-body dualism, with your nature-culture dualism. Out you go. A pretext, but you know the humanities are being eliminated, among others, along these lines. And social sciences are saving themselves by going big data and becoming quantitative, sort of enumeration of numbers. The qualitative elements are minimal, the critical ones absent, if not dead altogether. So the thinking of the institutional culture, thinking of what modalities we use in order to reframe our understanding of the conditions that we're in. The powers of affirmation are the powers, the praxis, it's the practical labor of extracting knowledge from the conditions that we experience as difficult, hard, or even painful. Deleuze, when he processes radical Spinozism in the 1970s and 80s to create a modern philosophy of life after fascism, he returns to Spinoza saying, affirmation is the power to forge together the means by which together, only in communities, we can create for alternative ways by which we empower ourselves to act. The idea that affirmation is the empowering ourselves to act, as opposed to the passivity of being seduced by microfascism, that is the ethical range that we kind of have at our disposal. The ethics of affirmation is the praxis, the practical work, the hard labor of together devising the means by which, through adequate understanding of the conditions of our unfreedom, we create alternatives, we forge the antidotes, we think otherwise, we run maybe a few risks. And the anti-fascist life is the life devoted to the adequate understanding of our unfreedom and the collective production of alternative by affirmation. Affirmation is empowered to act. And empowerment to act for Spinoza relies on the idea that everything that lives is driven to persevere in its existence. And life is not a hierarchical structure for Spinoza, it's a flat, immanent vision of life, but within this life, everything that lives perseveres, endures. We go on living through that death and beyond. Death is the unimaginable for Spinoza as well. So a philosophy of life for our times, a philosophy of life after and beyond fascism, not life with a capital L, transcendental, hierarchical, homicidal, exclusive, not a life that contains necropolitics in it, but just a life, as Deleuze puts it in his suicide note, as he decides to choose, as he chooses to end his life, just a life. the one life that we've been able to construct together in the name of affirmation, under the sign of affirmation. We will be lucky to have just a life. Most people don't even have that. They float along. Most of us just you know, zombify along, humming along. Just a life. The intensity of that moment of coalescence, of coming together, of adequate understanding, choice to affirm the truth and the empowerment to act. Empowering to act is not just a reacting. It means putting something else out there. A philosophy of life that undoes the hierarchies and brings you back to some elemental materiality. Spinoza today is the thinker of the anti-fascist life because he has also inspired neo-materialism, both in its feminist, anti-racist formats and in classical philosophical, a return to non-dualistic materialism, the totality of matter. We are made of elementary particles. The physicists know that. We are all made of the same nature. Neuroscientists know that. Only humanists don't, and social scientists who still believe in nature-culture divide. Everyone else has moved beyond that. With Spinoza, we can make the transition. Deleuze and Guattari build on this, and Guattari is particularly important. It's a bit of a difficult character, but it's particularly important because he has the media theory. For those of you, Guattari is the one who has the analysis of television as the media that replaces the role of radio and film in Nazism. Don't forget that the Nazis are forever singing, remember? They're forever going on with their music. So radio, music, songs in the Nazi period, 50s and 60s in particular, television comes. Do I have to mention one name? Berlusconi, blah and blah and blah. Variations of the same. 57 channels and nothing on, Bruce Springsteen. The homogenization of thinking, la pensée unique, and then comes internet. Oh boy, where do we start with that? Both uniformity, homogenization, and some sort of unleashing of profound, undiluted stupidity. People stay awake about artificial intelligence. I stay awake borrowing from Spinoza about natural stupidity. And stupidity is a big concept in Spinoza. Inadequate understanding, deliberate misunderstanding, not allowed to say that is wrong because that's elitist. Are you saying that I'm an idiot? No, I'm saying you're wrong. Two different things. Let's have this discussion. Affirmation as a way of processing the negative, not stopping at the negative, processing it, extracting from it the ability to affirm alternative values. The miracle of Spinoza's ethics, an incredible text, very tough, demanding a lot of us. Hegel says an elitist ethics, because it demands so much, then you expect us to be stupid then and incapable of doing anything if we're not capable of producing a minimal amount of affirmation. Why is it that the people who have the least always give the most? The immense love of life in Nelson Mandela's autobiography, a man who defined his 27 years in prison as my university, a man to the end of his life saying the pain taught me how to be Nelson Mandela. How are we defining here intelligence, understanding, and lack of intelligence and understanding, and what is the role of institutions in it? I'm entering the end. Anti-fascist life as the clinical and critical endeavor, philosophically grounded, not only politically, historically, a philosophical endeavor to cleanse ourselves, detoxify ourselves of the love of power, the kind of fascination for the power. And here we have to be a little bit ruthless. We have to stand in front of the mirror and affirm just to ourselves, admit just to ourselves the type of powers that we have. I made a list that, of course, I can't find, but of course, money, power to possess, consumption. Come on, let's. Who does not know the outlet on the doorsteps of Florence? Come on, don't deny it. Fame, celebrity, reputation. Come on, we're academics. Glory. Shall we push it? Immortality. Shall we go further? Nobel Prizes. Stand in front of the mirror and dare to say it. I want that. Now, nothing wrong with these deeply rooted desires. Spinoza is very clear on this. They can be very empowering. They become poisoning if they dominate your system of thought and they make you think of nothing else. So that there is never enough and more and more and more in the self-glorification of your own perceived power. It's a form of sickness. And Erich Fromm was right in seeing it as a form of dissociation, of psychotic dissociation. Nonetheless, the practical results are very tangible, an encouragement to actually nurture the most vain and the most vacuous, self-glorifying aspects of the immense powers that we possess. Spinoza is the thinker of conatus, which I call potentia, linking it to my teacher Michel Foucault's double understanding of power. You can have power as negative, the power that blocks you, potestas, but you also have the power that pushes you and empowers you, potentia. And it's not a dualistic opposition, they work together. Many things are both potestas and potentia, bits and pieces. If you're an academic, you do potestas for 80% of your time. You'll be lucky enough by being at the institute to have 20% devoted to potential. Lucky you. Mostly it's the management of the daily that governs our existences, but there are moments where we can actually manage the imaginary, the intensity, and we can ignite in ourselves and in our fellows the desire for truth, for adequate knowledge, for confrontation, for affirmation. That's the moment. That's the antidote, the anti-fascist life made of self-scrutiny, shared understanding, the courage to say, oh, actually, no, I don't think so, and take the consequences. Don't do it yet. Build your career first. But remember this after you get tenure. The understanding that all of this can only be done together, that you need a people, you need a community, you need a subject. So we, the people, we, who are we? How many are we? And how many we can we have to create what I call the heterogeneous assemblages of the willing, subjects that are committed to the anti-fascist life in the forms of adequate understanding, critical dissent, collective construction of affirmatives, alternatives, social horizons of hope, the courage to say, no, actually, I would prefer not to, which is Deleuze's translation of the negative. I would prefer not to, dear sir, dear madam, in the case of Italy, and to work towards the construction of the affirmatives. A task for philosophy, a task for communities, a task for those who are also not part of our communities, a task for alliances, borrowing the strength and the inspiration from elsewhere. And here we are living through a period, advanced capitalism, cognitive capitalism, where the production of knowledge is very distributed. In fact, there is knowledge produced everywhere in cognitive capitalism. That's why it's called cognitive capitalism. The knowledge economy, the research economy, a very large percentage of which is privatized. And the ethos of cognitive capitalism is the transhumanist belief that the human needs to be overcome and recast. So I want to conclude by drawing your attention to the transhumanist ethos that is at work in our society with actually ever pronouncing its name. Elon Musk and the people who are now colonizing outer space, they have 80% of the contracts of NASA. And the new space exploration is absolutely presented as an economic proposition. The legal framework is in place. It's the law that Donald Trump passed allowing mining on the moon and outer planets. It's one of the few laws by Trump that Joe Biden confirmed. And this is the reason why Musk and Branson and Bezos, the big tech giants, are going to outer space to construct the new phase of the extraction economy. A couple of months ago, 150 scholars and scientists signed a letter, and they sent it to NATO saying, will you please not repeat the colonial experience in outer space? Will you please learn from what happened on Earth and not repeat it? You couldn't make this up if you tried. All of this is information that I get from the newspapers. Did you notice it? Are you reading the space race? Or is it something that goes in one ear and out the other, thinking, yeah, there you go, yeah, not really. It's happening under our very noses. The ethos is very simple. It is transhumanism, located at the University of Oxford, the real one, the top university in the world, in an institute run by Nick Bostrom called the Future of Humanity Institute. Go and have a look at it. In fact, go and get a scholarship there. It's an incredible place full of very brilliant people. But the message is simple. The human is over. We can only survive the intelligent machines that we have created by becoming enhanced ourselves. The program is human enhancement. The research project that got several ERCs is called superintelligence. Am I making this up? Please Google. Okay, millions in funding. And they're pouring out this uncritical posthumanism, transhumanism, presenting it according to the formula which I recommend you repeat if you want to get your grant. And the formula is analytic post-anthropocentrism. The human is over. We need the machines. Analytic post-anthropocentrism. Normative neo-humanism. But this is for the betterment of humanity. Elon Musk says humanity will survive by going to Mars. John Lovelock in the Nova Scene, the last book he wrote before dying at the age of 102 or whatever, says the future of the humans is the cyborgs. May they be merciful to us. All of this is happening under our very nose. And then people get mad at me because I write on the posthuman, saying, oh, another mad feminist coming in with the posthuman. I am coming in with the posthuman? My posthuman is a critical reading of transhumanism. Had anybody actually noticed this? Or because it's located in Oxford, we can't say one single thing about it. One example of adequate understanding. One among many that I could be making about the momentous changes that we're going through, the challenges. And I am a person of science, I'm a woman, a lesbian of science. I love it. Do not misconstruct anything I'm saying as an attack on science and technology. I'm proud of what we're doing. But there are issues. There are questions. If we're enhancing, and I'm actually in favor of enhancement, who decides what? Which modalities? According to what? And why is the public discourse about technologically augmented humans obsessed with the LGBTQ and surrogacy? It's the only moment in the public discussion where we talk about machinic takeover of bodies. It's the surrogacy issue. It's the LGBTQ rights. Everything else that is happening about the manipulation of the human is under dignified and respectful silence. I call for an adequate understanding of the conditions of our limitations to freedom. Critical posthumanism is part of this effort. The idea is adequate understanding, affirmative ethics, courage, because the rules are simple. They can delay human intelligence. They will never delete us. Thank you for your patience.